second worst kind of bad evangelism is hypocrisy. Remember how I was just talking about people have to learn to trust us over time and learn that we care over time. If they learn over time by looking at our lives, I don't need to be trusting that person, then evangelism ain't going to happen. In a recent interview, a fellow named Todd Starnes, he's a news anchor and reporter for Fox News Radio. In a recent interview, Todd spoke of his recent open heart surgery. He said before the surgery, one of his young nephews asked him, "When they open you up, will they find Jesus?" That's a good question, isn't it? When they open you up, will they find Jesus? You know, as we spend time with people, regardless of the context, whether it's in a family, whether it's at work or at school or at church, when we spend time with people, it's like our lives gradually open up to them like a book. As your life opens up before your family, your neighbors, your friends, your coworkers, what are they seeing? As your life opens up, do they find Jesus? Three pastors, Steve Sjogren, I mentioned him earlier, Steve Sjogren, Dave Ping, and Doug Pollock recently wrote a book called Irresistible Evangelism. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. And writing about this very thing, living a life that matches up to what we're claiming, listen to what they say. Do you trust the TV testimonials' wondrous claims about a product that will give you washboard abs with no exercise? Or a paintbrush so spatter-free you can paint in a tuxedo? No? Then why should the people we talk to about Jesus accept the amazing testimony about what he can do unless they see believable results in the lives of their Christ-following neighbors and friends? A well-lived Christian life is more believable and more compelling than any sales pitch. I love that last statement. A well-lived Christian life is more believable and more compelling than any sales pitch. More importantly than learning a particular technique when it comes to sharing your faith, more importantly than that is just genuinely, sincerely living for Jesus. Genuinely, sincerely diving into your relationship with God. You know, when you do that, it becomes evidence. It's almost like this spiritual aroma. You've been spending time with God. I'm serious about this. You carry it with you. You come into a room, people be like, "What's that? What's he wearing? That's nice." But when we claim to be Christians, we claim to be followers of God and claim to represent God, be the people of God, but our lives don't match up. It's like we're walking in the room and we're carrying a fragrance, all right, but it ain't nice. What is that? Who is that? What? Did someone crawl up in that boy and die? When you walk into the room, at work, at school, at home, what kind of spiritual aroma accompanies you? We've been talking about bad evangelism, and I told you the second worst kind of bad evangelism is hypocrisy. That may have left you wondering, well, then what's the first kind? We've been talking about these different bad evangelistic approaches, and maybe you've been sitting there and you've been listening thinking, well, I've not done that. I've not done that. I've not done that. I'm doing pretty good. You know, this last thing we're going to mention, I really think, unfortunately, it's a type of evangelism that at some point or another, all of us have engaged in. As a matter of fact, it's probably a type of evangelism that most of us typically engage in. It's this. By far, the worst kind of bad evangelism is silence. The worst kind of bad evangelism is no evangelism at all. Remember, the gospel is powerful. Do something with it. At least get it out there. Give it a chance to work in the lives of people. And it will. Good things will come because the gospel itself is powerful. But what's so bad is when we don't even share the gospel. It's like we receive it and it goes no farther than us. Apostle Paul, writing in Romans 10, writes this: "For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. But how can they call on Him to save them unless they believe in Him? And how can they believe in Him if they've never heard about Him? And how can they hear about Him unless someone tells them?" I don't know if you noticed this or not, but on our church sign out front on the lawn, it says this: Satan loves silent Christians. Satan loves silent Christians. How many of you remember who Dwight L. Moody was? Famous evangelist who's kind of like the Billy Graham of his time, late 1800s. One day a woman walked up to him and said, "Mr. Moody, I don't like your method of evangelism." Moody responded, "Well, to be honest, I'm not too crazy about it either." He said, "How do you do it? How do you do evangelism?" She said, "I don't do evangelism." Moody then responded, "Then I would have to say that I like my way of doing it better than your way of not doing it." How do you do evangelism? How do you do it? Do you evangelize? A few years ago, an executive from our own Southern Baptist North American Mission Board stated that if current trends continue, listen to this, if current trends continue, 92% of Southern Baptists will die without ever witnessing to another person about Jesus. Think about that. 92% of Southern Baptists. You would think if anybody's out there witnessing for all the lip service we give it, it'd be Southern Baptists. He said, according to surveys they've done with actual Christians, do you evangelize? How long has it been since you've evangelized? If these current trends continue, 92% will go to their grave without ever taking the gospel beyond themselves. Satan loves silent Christians. Kind of makes you wonder, I wonder which denomination is Satan's favorite denomination. Is it Southern Baptist? We talk a lot about evangelism. We talk a lot about missions. You know what part of our problem is? Part of our problem is that we've got it in our heads that, okay, evangelism, witnessing, missions, what's that mean? That means campaigns. That means we go door to door, we have some big event where we invite all these unchurched people to come to the church. And we'll knock ourselves out and we'll do backflips, trying to do anything we can to bring them in. Or it has some sort of idea of a crusade or a revival or some big event where we draw them in. You know what, guys? The number one, by far, most effective means of evangelism is the one thing we don't do. And that's just personally talking to friends, family, and neighbors. That's it. Nothing we ever do can compete with that. Now, I know it's not uncommon to say, well, Pastor, church ought to be doing this. Church ought to be ministering that way. Ought to be serving in this way in the community and doing different things like that. And I'm sure there are a lot of things that we could be doing that we're not already doing. We're already doing some things. I'm sure there are other things we could do. But there is no program, there is no ministry, there is no event that we could ever do that will ever replace people just sharing their faith.